Welcome to another enlightening episode with Lana the Educator. If you're a first-time listener, it's great to have you on here. Here we explore the latest educational trends and tackle pressing issues facing the education sector. We also conduct insightful interviews with people making a difference and share stories of triumph and innovation from around the globe. If you're interested in all of this, then stay tuned. Today, I am honored to have a distinguished scholar whose work has transformed how we understand language, music, and Caribbean society. A lecturer in the Department of Modern Languages and Linguistics, bringing over 11 years of expertise in linguistics, whose groundbreaking research culminated in a PhD that explores diachronic language use in Jamaican popular music, spanning 5 decades from the nation's independence in 1962 to 2012. With a keen interest in computational linguistics and sociolinguistics, he examines the intersectionality of language, society, and culture in Caribbean music, an area often overlooked in discussions on language ecology and contact. His work extends to endangered languages and the sociolinguistic profiles of territories including Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, Curacao, and Suriname. Beyond his research, he is deeply involved in academic mentorship and program coordination, holding roles such as academic advisor, section postgraduate coordinator, and research supervisor. He has been instrumental in shaping the next generation of linguists and cultural scholars. Driven by a philosophy rooted in personal experience, he believes that the key to understanding life, whether personal or professional, is embedded in the narratives and dramatization of Caribbean music. His work not only preserves linguistic heritage, but also unveils profound insights into Caribbean identity and expression. Join me in welcoming Dr. Byron Jones, Jr. Welcome, Dr. Byron.
Lana, good afternoon. Thank you very much for that introduction. I'm wondering if you were actually introducing me, but but
It's you.
yeah, I've hardly ever heard it being presented in that manner, but I thank you for that introduction.
Thank you. So, before we start, I would like you to just explain to the listeners what linguistics is.
To be honest, linguistics is everything, you know. Uh, we often consider linguistics, not we, but the persons who often have heard about it,
Mhm.
but hardly ever interacted with it, see it as just you being a polyglot, a speaker of many languages.
Mhm.
But linguistics is removing the body from the car and going underneath to see what the engine is like, to see what the moving parts are to make this element of communication work. So linguistics in basic sense is the examination, the study of language. We can talk about it from different perspectives, and these are things that we're going to tap into in our conversation
Mhm.
this afternoon. But as it in its simplest sense, it's the studying of language. We can talk about it from language, the element of communication, or we can talk about it from the perspective of languages, the different languages, French, Spanish. But in essence, we have many different components. So
Mhm.
if you want to talk about the accents to see why a Bayesian stands out as a Bayesian,
Mhm.
separate from a Trinbagonian,
Mhm.
then you would tap into the area of phonetics and phonology. So there are different branches, just like medicine. When you talk about medicine, you can break it down into its different specializations. The same thing happens with linguistics.
I remember coming to university, people would say, why are you going to study language? What's that about? Why are you going to study more language? What for you makes linguistics so exciting or
Um,
interesting?
it is everything, and I'll tell you this: it
Mhm.
was never something on my radar
Mhm.
from the onset,
Mhm.
but the more I engage with it as a undergraduate student, I recognize that the most important thing for me with anything that I do is this thing is actually fun. I can use it to differentiate the space in Jamaica where I'm from,
Mhm.
um, when compared to someone in the same country but from a different region, unlocking the different features that make that stand out. So for me, it was just about being able to fit pieces of puzzles together and taking them apart and examining them and recognizing, again, this is fun. I am seeing things that I had never thought before that I would be interacting with. So when we talk about the syntax, the structure of um, sentences, for example, we can talk about what makes the subject of a sentence the subject, not in the sense of what it means, but in terms of how it functions, where it is placed, different things like those. And for me, it gave, most importantly, it gave me the opportunity to think. It's something that allows me to interact with content, engage with anything. And for me, as you would have said, mentioned in your introduction, music is my life, not as a creator,
Right.
but as a researcher. And that is what allows me to merge my passion of music
Mm.
with whatever my source of employment is, which is linguistics. And when we look at it from that perspective, I can break down the music in from different angles.
Mhm.
Uh, Look at it from, because if you think about it, going back to the analogy I mentioned earlier,
Mhm.
if you look at medicine, we have the human body. Linguistics, we have language, and there are different levels to languages. As a result, you will never get bored examining the different elements. So much so to the extent that if you think about medicine, if I want to um, be a cardiologist, I have to specialize. But with linguistics, you basically have the different areas, the different specializations interacting on a day-to-day basis. We can take one strand of linguistics, one subdiscipline, and explain a individual speech. And then we can take another subdiscipline and analyze that same individual speech, and you get several different things. So again, linguistics is just something that allows you to work on your own, to think critically, and to, most importantly, learn about the world around you.
Mm. You mentioned the focus on Caribbean linguistics with the intersection of language and Caribbean music, and I think you started to touch on it a bit. Why that particular focus? You look at Caribbean narratives and music as holding the answers to life questions. Can you elaborate a bit on that particular philosophy?
So let me start from the perspective of linguistics. Linguistics is the subdiscipline that allows you to talk about the world around you, but from the perspective of language and communication. And a big part of my love for linguistics is that it can take me back in history, and I can examine the history of a language and learn about the people having never met them. And so bringing music to that, to bring the looking at the intersection of these two things, it just opens up a different multiverse, opens a sense of a multiverse. If you think about it, music was something that I constantly engaged with, whether directly or indirectly. It was always in my space. So now when I grew to, as Jamaicans would say, have sense,
Mhm.
you now start to recognize that there are things that you can learn about the creators, even if they deliberately do not want you to know about it. and you can learn about them simply by tapping into the music that they create. Subconsciously, we give information about ourselves unknowingly.
Mm.
You understand? So when we say, when I if I ask you a question, I may ask you a question, and your focus is answering that question, but my focus is not necessarily on what you say, but how you say it.
Mm.
And that now can tell me, oh, this person from the western side of Jamaica.
Mhm.
And you say, but how you know that? It's just the trained phonetic and phonological ear that allows you to say you're merging two things. You are looking at the fact that this particular feature will place this individual in this particular environment because it is a scarcity. In linguistics, we classify it as a marked component.
Mhm.
So the feature that you ignore in your day-to-day interactions, those are the things that are interesting to us as linguists.
So we're talking about the Caribbean region, and I know there are linguists all over the world. How does the linguistic landscape here in the Caribbean differ from other regions? And why would we want to study that?
Well, let us what for me it always comes down to one single word: history.
Mm.
The history of the Caribbean, though there are overlaps in the characteristics that shape the region with other areas, like we can talk about Central North America. In the Caribbean, we have our own uniqueness. So the historical component of the Caribbean can be unlocked through the language. You can follow that trend. You can follow those patterns through the language. So for me, um, Caribbean linguistics is has a very, very close relationship with Caribbean history,
Mm.
because what we speak today, regardless of where you go in the Caribbean, and the other thing about it is that linguistics gives us a Caribbean linguistics gives us a different way to define the Caribbean, because usually when you ask if you ask someone from social studies, they will tell you from Bahamas in the north, to this country in the south.
Mhm.
But the reality is the history and the language provide a more concretized focus on how we look at the Caribbean. So we have to now take different things into consideration when we look at when we look at how diverse the region is. The diversity of the region comes from the historical diversity.
Mhm.
So if we are going back to a period of um, pre, if we look at it from the pre-slavery period, then we are going to find similarities in terms of who inhabited the region.
Mhm.
But now, when we look at the diversity in the region, then that is also shaped through history. Who went where? Who 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 was shipped where? Whether they came by free movement or by forced migration. All of these things have some impact. So then it comes on. It now begs the question: if our region has these defining components that shape how we see ourselves, then it is important for us to understand those characteristics. And it therefore means we have to go all the way back. So the history of the Caribbean is very unique, that allows us to say, um, this is why we are the way we are. This is the reason why we speak the way we speak. It's not just random occurrences. These are shaped by certain characteristics.
Mhm.
And that therefore means the Caribbean is a very interesting region. My focus is always here first, because as you mentioned, I I like to learn. I like the informal aspect of education. The formal aspect um is has to be conditioned by time. So, we have so many hours in the day for school. We have so many
Right.
hours in the day, but outside of the classroom, we still have so much to interact with. And if we tap into that part of the understanding, whether it's to um take up as the simplest, the thinnest book in the library that says Caribbean history,
Right.
you're definitely going to learn something about the region. Now, for me, the history allows me to know about my neighbors without ever having met them. And so if I say to you, you know, what is the split of West Indians to Afro-Caribbean persons in Trinidad and Tobago? And now we take that I ask you for that same measurement for Jamaica. It then explains a simple aspect of why people always say, well, when Jamaicans speak, we can't understand them because it's because of the fact that the demographic allows us to speak that way. If you don't have, think about it. If you think about baking a cake, you can bake a cake, I can bake a cake. But if we don't use the same proportion of the ingredients, then, and even if we use the same proportion, methodology is also different. So the outcome may be different. And it's the simple things like those that go unnoticed that I am interested in. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, merging so many different disciplines with linguistics is always important. And I learned so much about the Caribbean.
So I was reading, from the information you provided that you did research on diachronic language use in Jamaican popular music. So can you tell
Mhm.
us what that is, diachronic language use, and some insights from your study on diachronic language use in Jamaican popular music?
Um, all right. So let us start with the study on its own, and I'll tell you why we use that term.
Mm.
The 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 study of language and music for me was by happenstance. And I say that because I have always, as I said, been interacting with music, and I've always been a collector of music. So having that catalog sitting on, I didn't just want to focus on the here and now of the music that I am interacting with. I wanted to be able to compare periods. I wanted to understand what was the music like that my parents enjoyed, and what type of story is is told or hidden in the music that allows me to understand how different my parents are from me, you know? So it means, therefore, the diachronic aspect is over a period of time. And I covered 50 years of music. So I use independence as a starting point, because what you know about independence is just that. You think about independence, you think about freedom. Now, if you give me freedom, what did I do with it?
Okay.
So as a result, I wanted to document that the history in the music, and this was Jamaican popular music. So I wanted to examine what the language use was like. And you ask what were some of the findings of the
Mhm.
study. The most important thing that stood out for me is when we talk about the presence of English in the music, we would think, well, we're in a more diverse space right now, a social landscape where we have so much access to all this new information. We have so much access to language. We have so much access to learning. But what you found in the study was that there was more English in the music from the period around 1962, more than what you would find in the music today. And so the more you move towards 2010 2012, the more you found Creole in the music, Jamaican Creole in the music. And for me, as I always tell students, never stop at the what. Try to find out the why and the how. And that was the interesting part of the study for me. What I found, but also why is it the way that it is. And you tend to find different things about the music. You find that one of the reasons you had so much Creole emerging the closer we move to contemporary period is because of how the social landscape changed. So the social landscape changed in one where you had more garrison communities, inner city culture, and that was best captured by dancehall music as opposed to reggae. And part of that as well is that Jamaica has seen changes in the genres of music over those 50 years. So 50, if we take 62, prior to 62, we have mento, we have quadrille, we have a lot of folk music. But when you talk about indigenous music now, you are talking about ska. And you talk about ska, you're moving from ska to rock steady. You're moving from rock steady to reggae, and reggae had so many phases of it. So you have conscious reggae, you have lovers rock, you have roots rock, and then you have dancehall. So many different genres. I was wondering, do the genres contribute to the diversity that we see in the linguistic landscape? And definitely, because dancehall emerged. If you are old enough to understand and interact with dancehall music, you recognize that this is a totally different genre of music than the reggae that you were listening to. So when you listen to Marcia Griffiths, when you listen to Beres Hammond, when you listen to Dennis Brown, their music all around sound different from when you listen to a Beanie Man, when you listen to a Bounty Killer, when you listen to a Dirksman, when you listen, you understand? So what we tend to find therefore is that over this period of time, we were seeing significant changes in the music, and that change in music was basically mirroring the change in society. So we moved from that happy-go-lucky period of ska to now things getting hard. The social landscape changing. And as a result, whatever is the vessel that holds the culture and the story of a nation will change with it. So if you tap into music as music is, if you step outside of the realm of music and focus on, for example, movies, the landscape of Hollywood has changed significantly, and that is because of there's a shift with time. So as I said, the vessel, the vehicle, in this case, music, it tells a lot. And I can now go back to the history text and find that, oh, that is confirmed. I can have an interaction with the sociologists, and they will tell me, well, yeah, that is true. So you can talk about a culture from one perspective. And so I can talk to my mother about my study, and we'll sit and laugh about it, because she will tell me about, oh yeah, this period, and I'm like, all right, cool. Why was this song the number one song in 1975? What was going on in the period? And what you also recognize about Jamaica, we hear about Jamaica, the country, but there are different parishes in Jamaica. That's a division. And each parish has its own culture. That is embedded in the music as well. So there's a lot that I can tell you about the space. They say, you can tell an individual by how they dress. I can tell a society based on their music. So that was it for me.
Interesting. I want to shift a bit to look at, because we're both educators, even though it's at different levels, and I know for us and for many people in the Caribbean, there is a section of society, if I'm using the correct phrase here, that they have a problem with the Creole, with people speaking Creole, and there's a lot of stigma attached to it.
Mhm.
So what challenges do you see at the different levels students face with navigating between the Creole and maybe the standard English in the academic settings that you have encountered?
I will say this. If you, based on one of the questions you asked earlier, my response was that history is important.
Mhm.
But then when we tap into history, we also understand psychology. And the human psychology of the region is
Mhm.
one that is transferred. And by that I mean my mother's mother would say X about how she speaks.
Mhm.
And this is just hypothetical because the reality is awareness is also a critical component. What do you know about the language? So you'll always hear the story about children saying, oh, they were told growing up to speak properly.
Yeah.
And that is because of, again, the historical remnants that we have left behind in the region. And part of that is psychological. So we think about anything that is associated with the colonial powers, the colonizers, that is often deemed the prestige. So if we move away from language for a minute, in
Mm.
Jamaica, for example, the geography of the country is that we have, if we compare Barbados to Jamaica, for example, Barbados is very flat. Jamaica has hills and valleys. And one of the things that you tend to recognize is that the colonial powers used to live atop the hills. So in Jamaica now, anybody who lives on top of a hill is
Mhm.
considered an elite. So if you go to Kingston, in Trinidad and Tobago, in Trinidad, for example, they talk about the West.
Yeah.
In Jamaica, we talk about the uptown because it's just that up. So we talk about the geography, the geographical landscape, and we see that being associated with class, with a classist mentality. The language is the same thing. So the speakers, you command the English language well. You people see you differently because of the fact that we have this notion burnt into our thinking and into our psychology that anything that is associated with the colonial power is more prestigious.
Mhm.
Jamaica, for example, had Spanish in its history, but for the most part, Britain. So as a result, English, therefore, in Jamaica is going to be seen as the language of the elites, the upper class, the
Mhm.
bright ones, the persons with money. All of these things are narratives that transcend history. And then we think anything that is associated with the the slave population, the working class, the workers, the field laborers in general,
Mhm.
that has to be that has to carry fewer levels of prestige. But that is something that is not factual.
Mhm.
It's a borrowed story. So one of the greatest challenges now is to get students to recognize that the story that they have been told so many times, this correction that they have been a part of, is basically a fallacy because you speak what your history creates. And a big part of our legacy in the Caribbean is the Creole that we speak. That is what a part of the uniqueness of us. Every Caribbean territory will have their own linguistic identity. And that linguistic identity is often internal and external. Internal to the home, external to the home, internal to the school, external to the school, internal to the country, external to the country. We navigate so many spaces. So because of that, everywhere we go, we take a part of that space with us. And it so happens that when we step into the classroom, students struggle with this notion of I have to speak properly. And for me, I didn't understand that until I start linguistics because I'm from the bush in Jamaica. Not rural.
Mm-hmm.
Rural is still fancy. I'm from the bush.
Mm-hmm.
So as a result, you understand if you know about what the bush is like. Just like if you take access, if you have never accessed a region, access a space, then there's a high or access with anything or anyone from that space, then there's a high possibility that there's a high possibility that you will not possess the features of that space. The other thing about it is that seclusion and isolation will protect. And that was what happens with the bush. So whatever I spoke was considered a very basilectal variety of Jamaican Creole because I am from the bush. And I had to process that when I moved to Kingston for school.
Mm-hmm.
You start recognizing that not only do people around you speak differently, but they respond to you differently based on how you spoke.
Mm-hmm.
So no, like most Jamaicans will when once they tap into levels of education, regardless of the level of education, once they start interacting with the novelties of language and the mental ideologies of language,
Mm-hmm.
then they start to process things differently. So me now coming from the bush, when I am home with family and friends, I am never on guard based on how I speak because that's how everybody around me is speaking, and I am never received anyway differently. But now when you step into a classroom in Kingston, you recognize, all right, I know I also have to shape and fashion a version of my language that is also palatable for this space. So now you start mastering and navigating so many different identities. And those different identities, you have a language for each. So students have to deal with that when they are in the classroom and teachers are telling them, um, answer this question, and you answer the question, but not in the language that they fancy. You
Yeah.
feel as though that you are wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You also have the aspect of outside of the classroom where who your friends are will shape how you speak. So now you navigate so many different spaces. You interact with so many different languages, versions of different languages. It means that you are also navigating self. Who am I based on my language? Do I speak the same way when I return to my country in St. Elizabeth?
Mm-hmm.
No, because more than likely you're going to hear, oh, you feel like you're better than people. You understand? So these are real things, and we will relate these things in narratives, in conversations, but then there are other persons who live them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just as important to our identity. So for me, I always say to students, take what you have to the classroom. Do not worry about how you sound. Once we can understand, then we can navigate. I can work with what you bring to the classroom with me. Bring to the classroom with you. I can work with what I have, and we can make it work, get you to where the system wants you to be. And I say the system because for me, I still think that we are ways far from moving away from this problem of linguistic identity and linguistic ideology based on the fact that we speak a Creole. So those are some of the things that we have to move through. So it's a very difficult space, especially if you can't, because the system asks of us so many things that we can't. So speak properly, but I can't based on what you classify as properly.
Yeah.
I can't meet those standards. So now what is left of me? How do you view me thereafter?
Mm-hmm.
So these are some of the things that we have to take. We have to be conscious. You wonder why this student doesn't speak, but you see her out on the field with her friends and they're
Yes.
having a good upper time. But when in the classroom, it's about the environment, it's about the space.
Yeah. Is there anything you would like to add or that you would like the listeners to know?
Um, there's an important space for us to understand ourselves, and if we listen to ourselves as on the basis of how we speak and we tap into our history, do some reading. Do not leave it to someone else to tell us the story about ourselves. You know, there's so much out there that typical and atypical. So you can go and get a history book and read. But listen to the music of your space, the
Right.
music that you love so much, and compare it to what you listen to outside of the country and recognize that same ideology, same notion of language to some people, but different ideologies.
Mhm. Thank you so much. And I want my listeners to know that you empower minds and you ignite curiosity.